So here is a man who knows the supernatural grace of God, and he knows the blessings of God, and then he turned back on relying on his own efforts, turned his back on God's grace, and that brings a curse. Hi, I'm Rodney Tyson, your host on Mysteries of the Bible, and today we're going to pick up and continue on the breaking the power of generational curses. And we're going to look at part 3 today, and going to dig deeper into it and talk about more curses and how they can affect your life. Okay, number 8 is depending on flesh. Jeremiah 17, verses 5 through 7. Thus said Jehovah, cursed is the man that trusteth in man, and maketh flesh his arm, and whose heart departeth from Jehovah. For he shall be like the heath in the desert, and shall not see when God cometh, but shall inhabit parched places in the wilderness, a salt land, and not inhabited. Blessed the man that trusteth in Jehovah, and whose trust in Jehovah is. Now, this is just a few short words in Jeremiah. And I think often we pass them over without really appreciating their significance there. And notice, please, that he says that it's a very good description of what he says of someone under a curse. Blessings are all around, but yet he lives in a dry land. Rain falls everywhere else, but it doesn't fall on him. So what's the cause of that curse? Trusting in man. But the scripture says whoever departs from the Lord. In other words, here's a man who knows the supernatural grace and blessings of God, and then turns back to relying on his own efforts. Turn his back on God's grace, and that brings a curse. All right, number 9 is stealing or perjury. Zechariah 5, verses 1 through 4. Then again I lifted up mine eyes and saw, and behold, a flying roll. And he said unto me, What seest thou? And I answered, I see a flying roll. The length thereof is 20 cubits, and the breadth thereof are 10 cubits. So Zechariah has a vision of a flying scroll, and there was a curse on each side of the scroll. One was a curse of anyone who steals, and the other was anyone who makes perjury. And in this vision, this scroll will go into a person's house and just take up lodging there. And the whole house would just disintegrate. See, that's the nature of a curse there. It doesn't affect a particular area. It has like a corrosive effect around it. Let's move on to number 10. Stinginess toward God. Malachi chapter 3, verses 8 through 10. Will a man rob God? Yet he rob me? But ye say, Wherein have we robbed thee? In tithes and offerings. Ye are cursed with a curse, for ye rob me, even this whole nation. Bring ye the whole tithe into the storehouse, that there may be food in my house. And prove me now wherein, says Jehovah of hosts, if I will not open you the windows of heaven and pour out a blessing, not room enough to receive it. Now then we're getting into the whole tithing situation there. And I don't have time to go into all that tonight. But this is what I will say about that. We have a responsibility, and the Bible's very clear on that, to tithe. Now, I want to suggest to you that grace should make us more generous than the law, okay? We are told we have a better covenant based on better promises. And I'll say one thing about that. Stinginess towards God brings a curse. And it's a very poor economy strategy to be stingy with God. And when the offering goes around, God don't need our tips, okay? So those are specific courses of curses. If a man speaks on behalf of God and God's mouthpiece, there are many examples of this in the Bible. And I want to give you a few. The first one's in Joshua chapter 6, verse 26. And Joshua charged them with an oath at that time, saying, Cursed be the man before Jehovah, that riseth up and buildeth his city Jericho. With the loss of his firstborn shall he lay the foundation thereof, and with the loss of his youngest son shall he set up the gates thereof. Now, after God had destroyed Jericho, Joshua, who was there, after the fact, he was the leader of his people and God's mouthpiece. So Joshua pronounced a curse on anybody who would rebuild a city on that particular site where Jericho was. That's a very specific curse there, not a general curse. But the form of the curse that the curse would take would be that the person who rebuilt on Jericho would cost him the lives of his two sons. Now, I'm sure most of the Israelites over the years forgot about that curse. It just went away and faded away into the history. But about 500 years later, in the reign of Ahab, the king of Israel, the wicked king, a man did just that thing on which Joshua had pronounced the curse. And we see that in 1 Kings. 1 Kings chapter 16, verse 34. In the days that Hiel the Bethelite built Jericho, he laid the foundation thereof with the loss of Abiram, his firstborn, and set up the gates thereof with the loss of his youngest son, Segub, according to the word of Jehovah, which he spake by Joshua, the son of Nun. The marginal translations say, at the cost of the life of his son in the Bible. And most modern translations just follow that. So what happened? So the man went against the curse pronounced by Joshua 500 years earlier. It cost him the life of his two sons. All right, so let's move on to other sources of curses here. Persons with relational authority. I'm going to say that again. Persons with relational authority, like fathers. Now, this is very well recognized by any of the modern churches. That is, persons who have authority because of a relationship. Now, authority is a very unpopular concept in many places in the world today, and we all know that. But the fact still remains, it's still real. Authority is not created by man. It proceeds from God. And there are many different relationships in which a person has authority. Now, you may or may not like it, but a husband has authority over his wife in a certain context, okay? There's men who take that out of context. Just like parents, they have authority over their children. Teachers have authority over their pupils. Pastors have authority over their congregations. Let's just take a few examples because I want you to grab a hold of this. Now, because of the authority relationship, words that are spoken by those persons to those under the authority have special supernatural power. Now, whether they be blessings or whether they be curses. And if you look at the Bible, you'll find that the second to the blessing of God, the most important blessing that any person could ever have in his life is the blessing of his father or her father. And that's still true today. I would say to anyone whose father is still alive, do everything in your power to obtain the blessing of your father and your mother, but primarily the father, because it makes a lot of difference. Now let's look at some practical examples of a curse. Let's take, for example, I'll put this on the board, a father cursing a son or a daughter. Now, most of these are constructed. Let's take a father. A father has, say, 3 sons. And the first son is the firstborn. Of course, he's always welcomed. The third, the youngest, he's brilliant. And then you have the middle one, who is not a firstborn or brilliant. And he has a lot of the same characteristics that his father has. And have you ever noticed that when people are bad, and they're bad in the way that they're bad, that we're bad, we like to take it out on them rather than we would ourselves? Does that make sense to you? Have you ever noticed that? Let me say this. Parents, if you pick on one of your children, he's going to be the one most like you. What your objective to is you. What's in you that you don't like? All right, anyways. So the father says to his son, you'll never succeed. You'll always be a failure. You'll never make it. What's that? It's a curse. There are many men and women in their 40s or 50s who are still struggling against words spoken by a father before they were teenagers. Or let's say a father has let's take another example. A father has a daughter, say 15. Some ladies around 15 have acne, And the father has to drive her to school every day. And every day she's up there in the bedroom putting things on, and she's late. And so the father gets mad. And so one day he says, you'll never get rid of those pimples. You'll have them the rest of your life. And say 15 years later, she's married with children of her own. And there she is struggling with acne. Why? Because of a curse. All right, let's move on to the next thing. The next one is a teacher cursing a student. Let's say a teacher has a pupil that can't spell. And maybe he's got what you call dyslexia. And the teacher says, you're silly, you're stupid. You just don't try hard, you'll never succeed. Now, no teacher at all should ever talk like that to a student. But in the real life, sometimes they do. And what's the result? A child, a boy or girl, that can never make it in life. So, there's been people who have struggled all their life, people in their 70s even, who've struggled all their life over a statement so simple as, you're shallow. You see, there's authority behind those statements, and that makes them powerful. Usually speaking, it's a demonic element. All right, and I'll show you one thing in the book of James that's very important. James chapter 3, verses 14 through 15. But if ye have bitter jealousy and faction in your heart, glory not and lie not against the truth. This wisdom is not a wisdom that cometh down from above, but it's earthly, sensual, and it's devilish. In other words, if your attitude is wrong and your reactions are wrong and you speak, what's going to come out will have a demonic element in it. Thank you so much for joining us today on Mysteries of the Bible. If you'd like to order this program that you heard today, then you can email us at mysteriesofthebible7@gmail.com. Ask for program S2P3. That's program S2P3. And if you'd like to order the whole series on breaking generational curses, just simply program S2. And we're going to have more on this tomorrow, part 4. This is a big series that we're doing, and a very interesting series that will change your life. So be sure to join us tomorrow for part 4 of Breaking Generational Curses.